Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McHughes. I got a special episode for you today. We're going to look forward and try and make some educated guesses about what we think the offense and defense will look like under their new coordinators, Jesse Minter on defense and Declan Doyle on offense. Joining me to do that is Rasmus Larsson. Rasmus, how you doing?
I am doing wonderful, Ken. Thank you for having me. I have about 25 more hours to enjoy the World Cup here before Sweden gets knocked out by France. But otherwise, everything is fine.
Yeah, well, we're hoping the USA doesn't get knocked out by Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it could be. I mean, the 61st best team in the world they'll be playing. But yeah, that'll be good. Sweden looked great in that opening game, though, didn't they? And then they
looked equally as bad
yeah.
the next game. So yeah, it is what it is. We'll see.
All right. Well, fair enough. So back to proper football, or American football. I guess proper football is the World Cup here. But let's talk about Jesse Minter and his defense first, because I think there'll be. We can also talk about strategy, by the way, too, which I think would be an interesting Minter component. But let's talk about the defense first. And one of the things we're starting off with is a defense that has some significant similarities to what he had with the LA Chargers last year.
Yeah. Exactly. Defense in LA Chargers that was extremely good, statistically very dominant and leading in a ton of crucial aspects. So it's as we've gotten to know it now, the modular defense, which Minter together with Mike McDonald and John Harbaugh started building a few years ago when they were both in Baltimore, through Michigan, and then in Seattle and LA. I think there's 4 teams as of today that is connected to this system, which is Baltimore, and it is the Seattle, of course, Chargers, and then also the Giants due to Harbaugh's arrival there. So I think those 4 teams have a head start
Chargers,
in this defense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of talking about what that is, maybe we start with personnel packages, because it's a lot of what I study is who's on the field personnel wise on a given play. The notion that you truly have a positionless defense, way overplayed. I'm not saying that there aren't ways you can use these, an individual personnel package in different ways. And there are, just like the way you can put 3 tight ends on the field and you can line them up all kinds of different ways. You can figure out, 20 different ways to throw 3 tight ends together on the field. But I don't think we're as far from standard NFL defense as some people would tell you. And I think you just have to start kind of with the personnel that were present in LA and also present in Baltimore, and starting with having a great slot corner in each case is kind of the cornerstone of the defense with Derwin James and Hamilton. Both those teams want to play big nickel as a substitute for some base snaps.
Yeah. And I also want to add, like, other than just the personnel on field, I think what they usually push on, like why they say it's revolutionary in a sense, is what it does off the field as well, in that it, due to the verbiage, due to the much improved and easier way of verbalizing everything, they claim that it improves like rookie development quite significantly. And also with the week-to-week game plan installments, so which are not necessarily things you see concretely on the field, but that works behind the scene.
We certainly saw McDonald have a lot of success in terms of having his players understand not only what their responsibility was, but what the other players' responsibility was with what was going on there. And that had been a complaint of, I'll say, Mike Green is the one I've heard it from most recently in the OR system.
Yeah. I think Mike Green and Zion Young are definitely 2 names to keep a lookout for this new defense in 26.
Their developmental path, to me, is probably a little different, because neither of those guys is going to drop the coverage too often. So they do have, Zion has a different role because he's a potential kick inside guy, but he has a fairly straightforward path. There's not going to be, in my opinion, too much different for Zion Young from what he did in college, other than kicking inside possibly on 3rd down and beating a guard instead of beating an offensive tackle. He did some of that in school. But Mike Green, it's a whole new ball game for him, particularly in terms of probably how they protect his development this year in terms of being a guy I expect to be very much a situational pass rusher.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you, maybe putting you on a spot a little bit, but regarding Mike Green, if there's one single thing that you could like focus on, isolate for him to improve on this year, what would that be?
Oh, I mean, he's got to develop an NFL bag of pass rush moves. He made a double
Moves.
jump
Yeah.
from Marshall, and he needs to adapt to the speed of the game at the NFL level and the ability of tackles to react and punch and do all the things they do. Which means he's got to basically figure out what my bag works and what doesn't. And he had quite a
Yeah.
bit. He did. There was quite a bit he could do at Marshall, inside, outside. He was a very good, quick off the line and whatnot. The biggest thing about Mike Green has been motor, and I think when you have
Yeah.
that and you have a kind of a relentless pass rush across, you're gonna get results. So hopefully that at the worst he's like a Michael. And that's not fair. At the worst, he's got Michael McCreary's motor, and he can put
Yeah.
that to good effect. And I think they'll play him a lot less.
Yeah.
For early down snaps this year, based on the fact they have Tavius and Zion Young.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Hendrickson as well coming in now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hendrickson will share the third down snaps. They're the situational pass rushers, one of the two of, if needed. If they have Matabike, they don't even need this, but one of the two of Zion Young and Tavius Robinson can be kicked inside in the formation, and then they'd have Hendrickson and Hendrickson and just talking about him, Mike Green, on the outside.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the third down conversion is something the Baltimore needs to step up on this year, which Minter definitely did with the Chargers last year. I think they were second, 4.1 third down conversions a game. I think they allowed on average. I think Baltimore was up to 5 something, which is an entire drive's difference, I believe.
Yeah, the Ravens allowed a lot more offensive snaps by the opponent, which is going to contribute to that. But still, that is a big difference. That would be enough that the rate, obviously, underneath that has to be pretty bad. I'm going to take a look and pick that up while we're talking here.
Are you talking about the plays per game, offensive snaps per game?
No. I mean, the offensive snaps per game. They lost offensive snap count by about 7 last year. But I'm talking about the rate of conversion as a team on offense. On defense.
On defense.
And I'll get that for you, but let's just move ahead.
Yeah, I actually looked at these numbers in the beginning of the week, and I'm scrambling to find them. But because I believe, as far as I can remember, I believe actually Ravens had, if not the lowest, at least bottom 3, both in, I think it was fourth down conversion and fourth down conversion, like success by offenses. I think Ravens were extremely low down the list, which is interesting because it's also like, would you inherently say it's a bad or good thing that opposing offenses continues to go for it on fourth down against you? I mean, you can interpret that 2 ways, right?
Right. It's not. It's often a good thing, but if they go a lot against you, they should succeed a lot less because they should be taking more desperation 4th and 8, 4th and 10 in negative game scripts.
Yeah.
So if you're dominating football, you will dominate fourth down as well. Let me see if I've got it here. The fourth down percentage. This can't be right when I'm looking. Oh no, I'm looking at the Arizona Cardinals, and I want the rankings for the teams here. Okay. All right, I'll find this, but I don't have it right now.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
So let me talk about one thing that I think is a general trend, and I want to hit this up because I think I can kind of set a floor for something, and that is the Ravens have really reduced the amount of base defense they played. Last year, the combination of the base defense is under 10%, but the combination of base and jumbo, and some of the jumbo is you're trying to stop the run on short yardage at the goal line or on fourth down plays, conceivably, could be 3rd and 1. But at 11.8%, they used jumbo and base combined. That is incredibly low. The 2019 Ravens, by comparison, had 10.3% base defense alone. I didn't include jumbo with that, and that base defense. I do have that right here, but okay. Let's see. The Wink Martindale 2019 defense had No, it had 10.1% combined between heavy and base. So that was a case where positive game script really was a further exaggerating the number down, the number of base down. Last year, 11.8% is still incredibly low. By comparison, in 2012, the Ravens played 50.6% of their snaps in base or jumbo. By comparison, in 2006, greatest
Yeah.
defensive year for the Ravens by some measures, 58.8% in base. And the 2000 team numbers are a little different. I'm going by the number of defensive backs and is defining what's base. And remember, they played a 4-3 back then.
Yeah.
That's the only one of these years where they didn't. And that were at 51.6%. So it's a whole new ball game for the Baltimore Ravens trying to have Kyle Hamilton effectively replacing a 5-tech on the field. He's a slot corner, but because he's so good at run defense, they have him effectively taking a 5-tech off the field, and you always maintain a good passing defense when you have that big nickel out there.
Yeah. And that in relation to, I know all the talk these days about that the league is so heavily skewed towards 13 personnel, especially starting from next season, given you saw in the draft all those tight ends and in the free agency. Do you think that will impact anything now? Like,
I think it will. Okay, so that's all the tight ends in the draft league wide. You're saying, will that affect the Ravens defense? Because we're going to talk about the offense in a minute when we talk about Doyle.
For sure. But the defense, no.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that is a reasonable thing. That big nickel is exceptionally useful when the other team's in 13 because it's quite adaptable. You're already saying, I'm okay if you run or pass against this because I'm willing to use it on 1st and 10. So you pick your poison if you want to try and beat Kyle Hamilton on any kind of strong side run play, or you want to throw a little bubble screen out there. Whatever you want to do, I'm comfortable playing this as my most commonly used package.
Yeah, because it's also, I mean, given the teams in our division, I think Pittsburgh will go a ton of heavy, just off the bat. Cincinnati, difficult to know. I mean, they're so good and efficient the way they are spreading the ball on the outside, but I don't know if they will shift to anything now.
So Cincinnati, they're probably going to be the least 13 of anybody in the division, but they do have some options to play 12, and they certainly have lots of options to play 11. Don't really use a fullback, and when they do, they bring in a defensive lineman or something on the goal line. So they're not trying to propagate the use of a fullback when they do that. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody in the division who has an obvious set of personnel that takes the Ravens out of big nickel. The team that would do it would be Cincinnati, and they would do it on obvious passing downs.
Yeah. Gonna be fascinating to keep eyes on Monken in Cleveland as well. Gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we move over to the offense, or should we stay?
Let me see. There's a few other things I wanted to talk about on the defense. Cool. I think they'll play a little more zone defense this year. I think what's important is, and Minter is successful playing zone, but I think it's important that can't really be a crutch for any defense. That there's certain downs, and it's usually 3rd down and medium and 3rd down and 2 or 3 yards, up to about 6 yards, where you have to be in man defense. I mean, you can play zone, but you're giving up a high percentage chance for a completion to get the 1st down. And most of the time, when you're playing zone on earlier downs, you're putting up a front for run defense. You're trying to stop the pass as well, and that's why 1st down plays are tend to be more successful. Is that they give the opponent more optionality in terms of whether they're going to run or pass. And you don't want to present, space to the offense to use that zone has when you're on 3rd down if you can avoid it. So while I think a lot of people are saying they're going to play so much zone, that Minter's defense is going to make all of these older, slower corners, I'm talking about specifically Awuzie and Humphrey here, into better players. And I just don't see that as true.
No, fair. I agree with you.
One thing I'd say is Minter has done a lot to make inside linebackers and cornerbacks of fairly average quality be better. So we looked at who they had with the Chargers last year, and it's not a great set of players, either at outside corner or at inside linebacker. I'm going to bring up the list here right now as we talk, but that's something to hope for, is that McDonald certainly did a very good job of making some average players like Ronald Darby look very good when he was here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what they say. Week-to-week game plan adjustments will be more efficient, which in turn improves the players.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that they if they you're right, if they figure out what they're going to do on a weekly basis and align that well, yeah, I think that's a great place to start. Who they have last year was I'm looking at 22 here, but 25 the Chargers had at inside linebacker, the guys who got a lot of snaps, Deion Henley, who had a pretty darn good year. They had Delshon Phillips playing a backup role, Troy Dye, and Denzel Perryman. That is certifiably not a particularly great group, and they were okay with him. So they probably got a bump there. And then in the outside, they had Tarheeb Steele, and I'm not sure if he's a slot. Cam Hart and Benjamin St. Juste were the guys who got the most snaps, and Dante Jackson. And those guys, every single one of them had good coverage years. So there is something to be hoped for, that Minter will come in, especially with Mickens with him, and they'll get, B+ level play out of C players.
Yeah, exactly. I think about the mic position with Roquan. Like, was it? Am I imagining this? Had he slimmed down quite a lot? Was the reports, pictures of that?
When I've seen him at camp and at the podium, honestly, it still looks kind of big to me. And
really?
As an inside linebacker, he needs to carry a bunch of weight, and it's appropriate for him to do it. He sometimes talks about the other two guys as if they're chiseled Greek gods relative to him. And it's actually kind of a funny thing. Is Rotan's just he's carrying a little extra weight around his midsection, and he throws his weight around, and he leads with it, which is if you use it well, and he has in his career, then it's a positive thing. But he's carrying extra weight. I think he still is. And in terms of the other guys, they're very chiseled. Like Simpson he's big, and he's big in his upper body and his biceps. He's got huge guns. I mean, I think the same would be said about Teddy Buchanan too, as he's much more, looks like much more of a workout warrior. I know Roquan lifts and all that. I mean, that wouldn't be the question. He's there all the time, but
of course.
But yeah.
No, but I'm thinking if it was anything that we talked about him for this season, for him to slim down just for the single purpose of covering space.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, he had a pretty good coverage year last year, carrying some extra baggage. I'm one. Roquan is, if there's anybody on the Ravens who really understands what they need to do their own job well, it's Roquan Smith. The guy's he's a complete professional. He's there all the time for OTAs, and he's a real leader. He knows what he needs to do to make himself right to play football. So I wouldn't tell him to sculpt his body in some particular way. And I think whatever comes along in terms of speed loss, Roquan is probably critically aware of this, acutely aware of if his speed is really affecting his play.
Yeah. No, I agree for sure.
All right. Got one more thing to say before we move on to the offense. And that is that, I'm unsure if the Ravens are going to have 4 or 5 defensive linemen active per game. Now, one thing I can almost certainly say is that they'll have 5 on the 25-man roster. I think it'll be exactly 5. I don't think they'll carry 6. I don't think there's ever really any room to do that. So you have to deal with the top of your practice squad guy being ready to go, and the Ravens have had a lot of their activations come from that spot. But there is a question of whether they activate 4 or 5 per game now, since they play so much big nickel. I think it's way too much of a risk to take to go down to 4, because I think you get one injury and then somebody else is ineffective, and all of a sudden you're in a big hole. And Ravens have always played it as very much a rotational position, which I expect to continue. And it's just a case where I don't expect any real change to be made. I could be wrong, and this is a Weaver and Minter decision to be made, but whether or not they have 4 or 5 defensive linemen active per game is going to be one of the things I'll be really looking at in the early season on those inactive reports.
But a question, tell me if I'm wrong, but doesn't I mean Ravens historically has 5 suited for game, but isn't it wasn't it quite recently when the Ravens started now and again having 4? Like I'm just thinking, can you correlate that anything to McDonald and Minter's presence in Baltimore and that defense?
I mean, they certainly did it some still with Orr, and they got burned on it a couple times. And when did they last
But
play
don't you
Tampa?
think?
4 years ago.
Sorry, don't you think that Orr was like? Don't you think he held on to the same like type of defense? Try to some extent. I don't know. I have this feeling sometimes that Orr was maybe torn a little bit between his own principles and like maintaining the McDonald defense.
Okay, that's a legitimate point. I think that, first of all, through Harbaugh and the fact that Orr coached under McDonald, there's going to be a lot of similarities in terms of the way they want to run defensive scheme. So yes, I think he probably did that. But last year, remember, they had a lot of injuries on the defensive line.
Yeah.
So they ended up with 4 nose tackles, active on game day at one point. And it just, they didn't have a lot of options. And Orr was really having to make lemonade out of lemons on that defensive line without Matabike. So so I think they've got a better set of starting options. They also have a very old group on the defensive line, so they're going to have to be careful about rotational play. And I think they should go with 5 per game. I don't know if they will.
On that topic, just if I may ask, what percentage of Matabike playing this season? You have no idea. I know that, but
none.
Gut.
This is literally anything I'd be saying be a complete guess. I'd say, okay, let me allocate it out to a couple different tiers. The chance we see Matabike at his peak form that we remember him, 10%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The chance
even.
The chance that I'll just say I'm not he'll never return to 23 form again. I mean, that's a pipe dream because it's one of the best years ever by an interior defensive lineman for the Ravens. Yeah. But if he was an average of 23 and 24, I think 10%, maybe less. And the chance that he plays some, but is either not as effective or doesn't play as much, that's the bulk of outcomes. I would say that's 65%, and I think there's probably a 25% chance he doesn't play at all. Might be higher than that. I'm really hate to be the person who makes that as their expectation here, but I just think the syntax of it sounds a lot to me like Matabike wants to play. Matabike may have found a doctor who says it's okay, and the Ravens doctors don't necessarily agree. That's what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah, and of course I get not wanting to be the bearer of bad news, but it's also because I think a lot of fans cheered way too early. I don't know if he uploaded "Thank God" or something, and people just assumed that it was about him playing in essentially peak form again, which is completely, that's reading way too much into it. But I'm also very skeptical of him suiting up, which is a shame. One hell of a player.
Yeah, great player, and unfortunately, it's not a great position.
I'll be honest, this summer is stacked. Between that one big international soccer tournament, America's 250th anniversary, and the Route 66 Centennial, people are going to be traveling. What a lot of folks don't realize is that taking a trip in an RV is a whole heck of a lot more enjoyable than TSA lines or stodgy hotels. And you don't even have to own an RV or drive one to take part. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or camper almost anywhere in the country. You can drive it, tow it, or have it delivered and set up for you. And these aren't bare-bones setups. Many come with full kitchens, bathrooms, showers, and real beds. It's often more affordable than hotels, especially for families or groups. And everything includes insurance, 24/7 support, and roadside assistance. If you're thinking about a summer trip or just planning ahead for the rest of 2026, get 10% off when you book using promo code OUTDOORSY2026. Head to Outdoorsy.com. That's Outdoorsy.com, promo code OUTDOORSY2026.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
I did want to talk to you about Minter still on terms of strategy. So we'll get over the offense, but there's this head coaching component he's got to handle too, which is, will he be aggressive? Do you expect an aggressive fourth down coach?
I mean, yes and no. My hope is just intuitively thinking. My hope is that you don't need to be so aggressive because we'll be winning games before that. Honestly, of course, going for fourth down, being aggressive in general gets you there. But my hope is that we'll be quite. Of course, I'm super biased take, but they'll be quite dominant on both sides. It's going to be interesting to marriage like both Doyle and Minter's like offense and defense together. I mean, they come from both. Doyle comes from offense that dominated plays per game, offensive plays per game. Minter comes from the side that dominated plays per game as far as few from the defensive side. So they do want to own, they want to dominate the position. They both come from that. Of course, that's a game plan for every team, but. As far as being aggressive, it's a super good question. I mean, I think, as I said, I think you want to be in a situation where you've already won the game, sort of. But when you have Lamar, I mean, being aggressive is a tool. That's a weapon in and of itself.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I basically completely agree with everything you've just said. So the snap count is the thing that I think might drive some potential aggressiveness. If you look back at 2019, the Ravens killed their opponents in snap count, and they did it with a lot of going for it on fourth down. Now, that occasionally that means you give up better field position you otherwise would be, or you don't kick a field goal when you could have had one, but you extend drives and you run more plays when you go for it more on fourth down because you get a new series of downs a certain percentage of the time. And I think the Ravens being in this -7 position last year, that's got to be one of the things that helps fix it for it. So you can do, there's multiple ways to go at it. First of all, you can play a lot better defense. And we certainly hope the Ravens do that. Okay. Than they did last year. And you could blame the defense, but it's not all on the defense. A lot of it's on the offense. In fact, I'd say probably more than half of it was on the offense last year. The offense was plenty explosive last year, but they weren't, dominant and grindy enough. And a lot of that comes down to your choices on first down football, meaning you have to make a choice on first down as to whether you're going to run or pass. And you have to decide whether you want to try for an explosive play more often on first down. The more you try for explosive plays, the more you shorten your own drives. Now, it's being explosive. You don't want to take that away from an offense. And yet you do want to be grindy. You really want to run the ball and have progressive despair set in the opposing defense that they're getting run all over and they just don't have any way to stop it. And there's been a number of games in recent Ravens history, which are some of the most fun games for me to go back and rewatch, where they just run the ball, and the other team just can't stand it.
Yep. Wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly.
There's another fourth down component I want to talk about briefly before we move on to Doyle here. Sure. There's a couple of things that make me think he will be more aggressive. Number one is they had, I think, a very good football strategy guy in place. That was Daniel Stern. He was with the Ravens for 10 years, from 2016 to 2025. And he moved on to take a very a senior role within the Seattle organization. He's like an assistant head coach now. So a guy who came up in analytics, he made his mark in football strategy. He was also like an assistant quarterbacks coach. He was the cornerbacks backup coach or assistant cornerbacks coach one year. Guy's always around on the field, but a very good coach. They hired a new guy who's 26 years old, Charlie Gelman, and he's a former Big Data Bowl runner-up. And if you live in the nerd world, that's an enormous feather in your cap. You live in Europe, Rasmus, and it's common in Europe for companies to go and put modeling problems they have, put them out as a competition for various modeling teams to try and solve. And in fact, they have competitions for it. And sometimes you hire these same guys as consultants if you want to keep it, really secret what your problem is, and you want to just have that solved. But Europe has tons of these modeling teams that solve data problems like that. And it was actually an Austrian group who solved the expected yards, who created, I'll say, the current expected yards formula that's used primarily. So it's expected yards at the handoff. It's based on momentum of the running back and the positions of the other players on the field, and it's extremely well done.
Yeah.
It's didn't accomplish the NFL's goal of getting their next recruit for their data people, their next set of recruits for their data people from college campuses. So now they closed the competition to those guys, and now you can only be an undergrad and enter the big data bowl. Well, anyway, he entered, and one honorable mention when European teams were dominating it in a way the NFL didn't like. Yeah, so.
Fascinating stuff.
All right. So anyway, with a 26-year-old guy there, I think there's going to be chatter on the headset that he wants to be more aggressive. Yep. There always is. But I think that also he starts with an amount of currency in the bank. So he's not going to get fired next week for making a bad fourth down call. In the first week of the season, he has a good amount of run. And it's just one of the things he'll be able to point to. I think that means he's more likely to be more aggressive, I would say.
Yeah. I hear.
All right. I'm sorry, we're running a little bit long here, but hopefully that's not a problem. Do you want to move over and talk about the offense?
Sure. Let's do it. No, so one of the things that I wanted to kick off with was what we've already touched on a little bit, but I'd love for you to go deeper on it. It's the fact of, plays per game, offensive snaps per game, which, as we alluded to quite recently, we hope to and we plan to dominate. Just to some last year. 7 out of 8 top teams last year in the playoffs so the teams in the playoffs last year, 7 out of 8, those teams had most offensive snaps per game, plays per game. It's a recipe for success. Simple as that. Doyle comes from Chicago, which had the number 1 most offensive snaps per game with 67.
It's encouraging.
Very, very much so. However, and I wanted to bring this up with you. So we know that that's what we hope for. We've seen complete domination of what that brings, as you alluded to in 2019 Ravens. But the funny thing is, Doyle, the one constant thing he says during press conferences and interviews is that he highlights explosiveness, explosive plays. Now, sure, that may be just a mirage for whatever, or it may actually be, because who knows? We haven't seen him call plays. We know Ben Johnson did so, and Ben Johnson also had a ton high volume plays also when he was in Detroit before. But regarding the high volume of plays versus, in contrast to volume, or to explosiveness, what's your thought on it?
Well, first of all, that's the question I want to ask Declan Doyle the next time he's at the podium. Is basically, look, I know you'd like to be both. You'd like to be explosive and you'd love to be grindy. You'd love to have series success rate be high, and you'd like to have, more explosive plays. But what does this team need to be more of than they were in 2025? I think that's really the question. And I know what I hope the answer is, because I think that the team will be naturally very explosive. I don't think that's really going to be a problem. I think they need to get back to their roots and continuously. What it means is you're continuously focusing on success rate. So your first down plays have a higher success rate that keeps you ahead of the sticks. It puts you in better position to have a successful second down play, a successful third down play. And I'm defining that by the old Football Outsiders discussion, but it aligns very closely to what you think about football. You want to get 5 yards on first down. You want to get 3/5 of the remaining yards on second down, and you want to get all of it on third down, or you might risk punting. So anyway, all of those things are very important, and I hope Doyle is more. I hope he is hyper vigilant with regard to series success rate. Let me just say that, and I can live with a little bit less explosiveness.
For sure. No, I agree with you. Is it a question you can actually ask him at a press conference, you think?
Yes. Yeah, I think I can ask it. It's the sort of thing that it's philosophical, first of all, so it doesn't get into any particular scheme. It's at a very general level, so it should be okay. And the coordinators are on once per week, so when he's on at camp, I'll certainly ask that question. One big change the offense made, though, is moving away from the fullback. That they don't have a fullback this year, and that really means eligible receiver snaps need to be reallocated about 1/10 of them to other positions. So let me just say this: if you're out there and you're saying the Ravens are going to play more 11, the Ravens are going to play more 12, or the Ravens are going to play more 13, you're probably all right. You're probably right. If you said any one of those three things, you're probably correct, because a lot of 21 snaps are going away.
I was looking at those numbers as well. Chicago in 2025, they had, let's see, they had no receiver with 100 plus targets, but they had 5 guys with 60 plus, 60 plus receptions. Ravens had 2 in Flowers and Andrews. I mean, Ravens are quite top heavy. Bears were much more high volume, spreading the love. So I assume that's also something we'll see. Hopefully Bateman or whoever stepping up there with just a higher target volume.
So if we look at the 2025 season across the NFL, and I wanted to get the passing stats for these two teams. So the Ravens, all right, let me see if I've got the average for each team. So the average passing attempts by team was 545 last year. And the Ravens had, I'm sure they were close to the bottom in this. They were 32nd in the league with 422. So they had almost 25% less passing attempts than an average NFL team. And they way more less than the Bears, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of the difference in number of receptions, obviously, is that I've been on shows talking about fantasy football. I was on one recently, and the guy said, who do you like on the Ravens to be a really good fantasy target? I'm like, just stay away from all the Ravens, especially the Ravens receivers. The Ravens don't need to throw the ball more. They need to run the ball effectively and do what the Ravens have done in the past in terms of being very effective. The most effective offensive game last year was the Green Bay game. They destroyed Green Bay, and they did it all entirely pretty much on the ground. They had a few short passes, but it's. I hope we see as few passes, because in this year, unlike last year, I think it will mean the Ravens are really dominating.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Okay. Here's one thing I expect to see from Doyle. I expect to see extremely thoughtful, highly contemplative route combinations used. I think first of all, I see a guy who has the processing speed necessary to put together a game plan in that way and saying, okay, we're not getting overlap here. We need to make sure we don't have overlap here. You need to be here, to teach that both, scheme and technique wise, so that the players can maximize their chance not to have overlapping routes. Now, routes overlap in the NFL. It's part of in football at all. I mean, you cross some of route overlap is by design to try and rub or pick players, and it's not even bad. But there's always a big complaint when there's 2 receivers in the same area, and I do expect that that's a place, since the Ravens will face a lot of zone, that they probably will want to try and make use of that space best by making sure they don't have conflicting route combinations that cause Lamar to be throwing into an area where multiple people are.
No, I agree with you. And I mean, especially coming from the Sean Payton tree and the Ben Johnson tree, I mean, that's what you should expect. Yeah. Now, conceptual, of course, is a fascinating thing of mixing Declan Doyle's meticulous offense with Lamar Jackson as the most free and elusive quarterback throughout history. I mean, it's just could go so many directions, huh?
Yeah, it is. Something tells me at some point this season that he if he hasn't already, that Doyle will be thinking to himself, it's like trying to herd cats, trying to get Lamar to do what I want him to do. And yet that's exactly what he ought to do is let Lamar be Lamar, run around and make plays, because that's the way it's got. And Lamar, every time he comes over the sideline, Doyle's going to say, you got to explain that to me relative to the play I actually called. And he goes, just playing football, coach.
Yeah, just playing football. Just playing football and dominating the league. Yep. Yeah. That's all you do.
So anyway, I that relationship needs to be good, and it'll be good the less control, the more of a free will that Lamar is given.
Sure, but I also think, I think we've already seen a Lamar that has this is just my perspective of, but I think we've already seen that Lamar has a different like relationship with Doyle than his previous OCs. I think it's telling during the press conference that Lamar, in a very, very welcoming and loving way, talks about Doyle being on him, screaming at him, in a super, super mutual, respectful way. So I think, to me, who knows? But to me, it looks like they've already found the chemistry. I think it's a ton of mutual respect there, and I think they can take so much from each other. So, I mean, freedom and genius, some discipline, genius at the same time.
Yeah, that means a lot coming from you, because if you didn't hear Rasmus's first show, which came on about a week and a half ago, it was about looking at Minter and looking at some of his past press conferences, and what Rasmus, as a clinical psychologist, could draw from Minter's commentary. And it was a great conversation, by the way. Really enjoyed that episode, but it's still out there if you want to look at the YouTube or the Film Study podcast and find that again. And it means a lot to me when you say that you see that mutual respect there in some of the interviews you've seen so far. I think I see it too, and I see it not only from Lamar, but I see it from other people on the team. I mean, both Doyle and Weaver have called not Doyle, Zay Flowers and Weaver have called him a genius, and and it was like sandwiched around an interview of his. It was like this is a really good sign that these two respect.
Sorry. Yeah, but there are those few, because of course it's a limited sample size since we can just go by press conferences and interviews. But like there are those tiny nuggets. I remember super vividly. I don't know if you remember when Kyle Hamilton spoke of Mike McDonald. This is a few years ago, when he said, "Yeah, he's the smartest guy. He's the smartest guy in the room, but don't tell him I said so." It's a very fun banter, a ton of mutual respect, and I think that you could see the same thing when Lamar. Specifically the press conference when Lamar is talking about Doyle being on him and giving him shit, as he says, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, he said he got him to cuss him out, and he had made a mistake, and he realized it was his mistake. So that's great. It's good up there. It's owning it. Lamar's a veteran player now, and he certainly has understands some of the things to say at the podium. Lamar doesn't miss on. There's other guys on the Ravens I don't think you could put at the podium, or you couldn't put him up at the podium regularly. But Lamar, you don't have that problem. And most players, honestly, they get to a certain point in the league when they've been a veteran for a while. Like Calais Campbell is not going to trip over his own tongue at the podium.
No,
it's just not going to happen. And nor are any number of other veteran players. Roquan Smith, extremely focused and he understands what he should say at the podium. Kyle Hamilton, extremely cerebral, not a problem.
Yeah.
But there are players, I mean, who honestly. One of the ones from last year, I'll talk about him right away, is Kyle Van Noy. Got up the first time in camp, and he was basically complaining about not having a contract, not having an extension. And wrong audience, folks, wrong audience. It reminds me of, okay, I'll give you one other example that came up. This may be like too limited a payoff for the story, but I'm still going to do it. When Rafael Palmeiro was originally signed by the Baltimore Orioles, and this happened in 1993, by the way, you might not be a baseball fan at all, but he was signed from the Rangers. And one of the things he was trying to kind of talk through in the press was that, look, I live in Texas and there's no state income tax in Texas, and Maryland has a big state income tax. So like this $30 million over the life of the contract is only like $26 million if I were to earn that same amount in Texas. First of all, wrong place to talk about that. There isn't anybody who's going to be sorry for you earning 26 as opposed to $30 million a year. So, $30 million over the course of the contract at that time.
No, but that's just having no strategic intuition whatsoever. I mean, socially.
Low EQ,
for sure. And just to end with, I just wanted to say, like, I think the number one player I would love to hear pump Doyle up, or like call him, that would be Derrick Henry. Okay. Honestly, to hear him actually, because I mean, he says what he's expected to say and not much more. And I mean, he doesn't throw out these roses to everybody. I mean, he does his job, and that's that. If he would actually, like, unprompted by his own like free will, say, like, give Doyle his flowers or the offense his flowers, I think that's a huge sign.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that would be something that would be very, very interesting. So, and you're right. Henry never says that. He never really, I mean, he says exactly player speak, what you're supposed to say. And if he said, let me just take it aside
Yeah.
here, because I want to tell you what this guy has done with the offense here that I find really special. If he were to ever do that, that would be really
sure.
be something.
And I think, although of course Lamar is Lamar and the quarterback and top, I think socially, I think Derrick Henry is a heavy weight in the locker room. So him giving those flowers, I think that puts everybody on notice.
It's also, Lamar has normal ups and downs in his communication style, whereas Derrick Henry is a flatliner. You almost have to apply the paddles to get him to say anything. So if you did that and he would actually say anything, would be good.
Yeah. Identifying that outlier would be fantastic.
Let's see. Besides the thoughtful route combinations, one of the things I want to talk was about the tight ends, because it's not obvious to me how the Ravens are going to be able to maintain a high tight end target number despite having potentially more reliance on 12 and 13 personnel. Because you're going away from 21, you're going to have more tight ends on the field. You're going to have more wide receivers too, but you're going to have more tight ends. And it's not obvious to me, because Lamar has all through his career, he's never thrown to a tight end that he didn't grow up with. Now, be careful about that comment, because he grew up with Mark Andrews in terms of training camp and the early season of 2018, because he was the backup quarterback and Flacco was the starter. And he played with the twos with Andrews, and that's where a lot of their connection was really born in camp that year. And if you move forward to years with Hayden Hurst was added, Hayden Hurst actually practiced with Flacco in the ones, so he didn't get nearly as many targets as a rookie as Andrews did. And then you go forward, likely had the most targets, but still like 34 or something as a rookie had. And that's targets, not receptions, if I recall correctly. And Hayden Hurst got few. Who else got few during the time at tight end? Charlie Kolar never really became much of a target. Now, some of that is obviously usage from the offensive coordinator, but there's been other times when there's been options for Lamar to throw to other tight ends, and rookie tight ends, it takes time to develop, and they've got two guys here. I'm not seeing either of these guys being, a 40 reception guy. I think they're going to be, we might see 24 targets for Hibner. We might see 40. But targets for Hibner, but we might see 24. And if that's the case, he's not going to have a big receptions year. Not sure about Cuevas. I'm not expecting anything big. So maybe an even more concentration into Andrews. The other element besides the usage of tight ends, which I think is an issue that will have to be determined, is whether or not the Ravens want to go to use fresh legs. Now, I talked about this last year when they had a very, very deep core of wide receivers. They have that, of course. A lot of it is youth at wide receiver, where they might decide that they want to use fresh legs and go deeper in terms of snap count into some of their 4, 5, and 6 receivers. If they do that, they potentially can cause problems for opposing defensive backs being able to keep up with those wide receivers as they come on. It applies to tight ends as well. It could apply to running backs, although I don't expect it to apply there. I expect Derrick Henry to take the bulk of snaps. When you use a fresh legs offense, the thing you give up is the ability to run no huddle, because the defense has an opportunity to respond to what you're doing, and then they have to they're allowed to change, and the officials will hold up the game to allow that to happen. I'm sorry, we have you back here, Rasmus. If you want to cut your video, we might have a better chance to stay linked by audio at least. There you go. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Beautiful.
So I don't know if you said something in there or not. I'm going to have to listen to it on the local recordings when I get that in. But I might have talked over you potentially. But I seem to lose you there for a minute. But one of the questions we had is, do you expect fresh legs to be a part of this offense with Doyle, because he is a Peyton disciple, and you can put additional pressure on opposing cornerbacks that might be getting tired?
That's a super good question. So fresh legs. Well, I think Ravens offensively as a whole, I think is quite top heavy with the players we have right now. I think that is different from the past few years. I think on most positions we're quite top heavy, both on running back, wide receiver, and now tight end, given the loss of quite a few important pieces. So Sure, hopefully there are some like surprises or new younger players stepping up, but I'm not so sure about that. It's definitely a principle of their previous offenses. I just don't know if Ravens are suited for that in 2026.
Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. Rasmus, great talking football with you, and always great talking about reading between the lines in particular of interviews to see what we see about things. I think that's a lot of fun. Might make a good show on an ongoing basis to see if there are things like on a weekly basis we want to talk about that get uncovered, from that. But I really appreciate you coming on the show again. Tell folks where they can contact you, maybe online, if they want to talk football.
As I told you, I think last time, I'll be back on Twitter soon, on X soon, but I've given it a pause for like 6, 7, 8 months now, but I'll be back there soon.
Okay, very good. I apologize for bringing that up again. Other folks out there, please use hashtag Film Study Mailbag for your questions. I'll get them to the appropriate show. And if you have a short topic you want to hit me up with, this is the time. We've got several weeks now to record interesting stuff, and this kind of organic football discussion like we just had with Rasmus, exactly what I'm looking for. Let's have more of that, and I'd love to hear from you. Rasmus, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.